Ons is terug op die lug, Aitsa kykers. Neem julle sitplekke in, want hier kom 'n lekker ding. Welkom by die show met 'n difference. Jerusha Sheyer, Miss Global Namibia 2026, tells us about her passion and her plans to represent Namibia in the upcoming MS Global contest in Peru.
Hi everyone, I am Jerusha Sheyer, 21 years of age, and I'm currently the very first Miss Global Namibia 2026. Back in my days, I was raised by a strong, independent woman, a woman with courage, a woman with dignity. And those women are actually my mom, my grandmother, and my oldest cousin, Linoleum Leta Ashpara. I come from the heart of the southern Namibia, Keetmanshoop. That was 2004 that I was born, and for 5 years I have lived there. And then when I was in grade 1, my mom had a job opportunity in Windhoek. We moved to Windhoek in 2010. 2011, I started my school journey, grade 1 at Kamams Primary School for 3 years. In 2014, I came back to Keetmanshoop for that year to live with my grandmother, and I was at Laerskool Kroonlyn Primary School. 2015 till 2017, I was at Dr. Rita Johnson Christian Private School. Grade 8, Rosewood Academy. Grade 9, Amazing Kids. Grade 10 and 11, Rocky Grace High School in Windhoek. And I moved back to Windhoek in 2015 actually. My mom has decided, you know what, I have a daughter and I want to be a pageant mom. So my mom, although it was also my dream, my mom took the initiative to take me to a modeling academy, and it was there when I saw my passion. And since then, since 2015, I have made it my mission to be a Namibian representative. And it took 11 consecutive years of hard work and dedication to be where I am at now. Well, something about MS Global is actually an international beauty pageant which celebrates women of all the races. It celebrates diversity, confidence, and it also allows women of all ages to strengthen their platform in what they advocate in. They have 3 categories, which is the teen, the Miss category, as well as the Mrs. category. That also shows the fact that they have all the age groups involved in their pageant community. It also allows women to embrace their inner selves. It allows women to be positive within themselves. It has training schedules of body positivity, and with that is exactly what I stand for. Back in June 2025, we actually had our very first representative sent to MS Global contest, which was the teen MS Global Namibia, Caitlin Bosman. She won in the entire category, and she's the current teen MS Global contest 2025. She was then chosen as of her hard work to be a national director, and with that she took her directorship to find successors who will represent our country in the 7th edition for 2026. She chose me as Miss MS Global Contest Namibia, and she also chose a teen MS Global Namibia, which is Melanie van der Merwe. And with that, the trio is going to take on Peru once again for Caitlin Bosman, but as a unit we're going to Peru. The competition will take place as of 25th May 2026 till the 3rd of June 2026. Something that defines me as a young woman is a woman with perseverance, courage, and dedication. As it took me 11 years to be part of something like this, something big, to represent my country on an international platform, I think that is truly what defines me the most. My perseverance, my commitment, and my resilience. And also me educating about my advocacy on anti-bullying. Something about my advocacy is basically a sentimental situation I have come up with back in the days where I used to go to school, as well as the beginning of my modeling career. I have faced a lot of bullying, shaming from individuals that I also sometimes didn't know about. So I took it upon myself to get myself to a point where I can be confident enough to tell myself that the outsiders cannot define what's in you. You are the person that has to change your qualities inside. And that is how I came about my anti-bullying campaign. And it also provides the strength and the qualities that I preserved to the nation as well as to all around the globe. Who's my role model? Well, that is my older cousin, Linoleum Letra Ashpara. This is actually a woman that also helped my mom and my grandmother raise me. She is someone that took almost her entire time to take care of me, but also my mother is a very strong woman. So I see my mom in this woman. She is someone that has dropped some stuff to be able to entertain me since I was born, and she was only 13 years old. Till this very day, I can truly say that this woman has made me the person who I am. Something that I would say that young women should know is looks do not limit you, it's your mindset. So if you strengthen your mindset and you tell yourself, I can do this, then you can. Because something I also told my younger self, if I could talk to my younger self, it would be, I do not look on your outer image, but inside. Find the peace within you, find the grace and the gratitude in you, because that is truly who you example.
Ons wens vir jou sterkte toe, Jerusha, en weet, jy gaan Namibië trots maak. Up next, we join Mike Bratton, a professor emeritus at the University of Cape Town and an internationally recognized expert in marine biology, ocean conservation, and science communication, for a talk on women and oceanography.
It's wonderful the description that the Nama people give. The big water, keeper of hidden treasures. I couldn't think of a more apt way to describe the oceans. So, how well do we know the oceans? Well, very poorly so far. We've actively explored less than 5% of the ocean floor. We've mapped perhaps 10%. The rest is relatively unexplored. It's literally true that we know more about our moon than we know about our oceans. And this is a sad state of affairs, because although we live on land, we are totally dependent on the oceans for our survival. And that applies to all other plants and animals on the planet. And the reason for that is that all the major essential ecological processes and vital life support systems on the planet either originate in the oceans or over the oceans. So life on land is dependent on the oceans being healthy and being able to carry out those roles. So remember, all the major ecological cycles that make life possible on land start over the oceans. Now, Namibia is a maritime nation. You have a long coastline, and many aspects of your economy contribute to the so-called blue economy. In other words, the economy related to the oceans. So you're very involved in the ocean, and probably more than most countries, you're aware of its importance. And as a result of this, Namibia actually has a very fine record in ocean and coastal conservation. You've established a number of protected areas along your coast, and of course, also inland. So let's get on to the pioneering women scientists, marine scientists. And the first one, and perhaps the most amazing one of all, is Jeanne Barret, the first woman to sail around the world. Now we're talking about the 1760s. She took 10 years to sail around the world because they stopped at various places along the way. But it was unthought of for women to travel on ships at sea at that time. So the only way she could go on the ship was to be disguised as a man. In fact, she was married to a professor of botany, and he said he would only go on the trip if he could take his assistant with him. But he didn't say that his assistant was his wife. So she dressed up as a male sailor and went on the trip. Unfortunately, her husband died during that trip in Mauritius, but she remarried and eventually returned to Paris. And she had over 30,000 plant specimens that she'd collected. And because of the contribution that she made to botany, King Louis XVI actually gave her a lifetime income. The next one I'd like to mention is Jimena Quiros, a pioneering Spanish marine biologist and the first Spanish woman on an oceanographic expedition. Because in those days, women were simply not allowed on board ships, so it was exceptional to be the first officially recognized marine scientist on an expedition. Angeles Alvaro, she was one of the very first people in the world, male or female, to study zooplankton. Those are the tiny animals that drift around in the plankton in the open ocean. And she was the first woman, and the first Spanish woman, to participate in a British expedition onto the oceans. Rachel Carson from the USA. You will probably have heard of her as the author of the famous book Silent Spring, which was about the impact of poisons and insecticides on animal life. And that book had such an impact that it resulted in the establishment of the Environmental Protection Agency in the USA and the banning of DDT. But what is less known is that she published two very influential books on marine science and marine conservation. The first one was The Sea Around Us. It was translated into 30 languages and was one of the first books to plead for conservation of the oceans. Anita Conti, another pioneering woman scientist, and she focused mainly on science communication. She was probably the very first person appointed by a scientific institute as a science communicator. And she became particularly aware of the impact of commercial fishing on the oceans, and especially the wastage caused by the discarding of bycatchers. Another remarkable woman who followed a different track was Mari Thong. She was a geologist and a cartographer. A cartographer is someone who prepares maps. And she was the very first person in the world to prepare a map of the ocean floor. She first did that in 1957 for the North Atlantic Ocean, and then for the whole world in 1977. Eugenie Clark, she devoted her life to the study of sharks. And it's interesting that during the 70 years that she studied with sharks and swam with them, she never had a single incident where she was injured. The only time she was ever injured by a shark was when she was handling a shark jaw during a lecture, and she managed to cut herself on one of the teeth. She, among many other things, found a natural shark repellent in a flatfish. Ana Ramos was the first, went on the first Spanish expedition to Antarctica and began a tradition of Spanish women scientists being involved in the southern polar regions. Then, as the ambassador mentioned earlier, Josefina Castelli. Her specialization was marine bacteria and microalgae, in other words, the small phytoplankton in the midwaters of the ocean. She initially went to Antarctica as part of another country's expedition, but she lobbied for Spain to establish its first Antarctic base in Antarctica. And she became the first woman director of an Antarctic base. Then another important woman pioneer was Cindy Lee van Dover. Her particular interest was deep sea animals, and especially animals living around thermal vents. And these are sort of volcanic eruptions which occur under the oceans. She went as a crew member on the famous research submersible Alvin, and then became the very first woman to become an Alvin pilot. And Alvin, of course, was the submersible that discovered the wreck of the Titanic. Sylvia Earle, I've had the privilege of diving with her. She's one of the world's most famous deep-sea divers, a National Geographic explorer. She was the first person to walk on the ocean floor at a depth of 400 meters, and subsequently in a research submersible went as deep as 1,000 meters. And she has initiated so many important things, and one of them was a project called Mission Blue, which has established so-called hotspots, which are areas of high biodiversity in coastal and marine environments all around the world. Asha de Vos, a remarkable young lady from Sri Lanka. She studied at Oxford University in England and then in Australia, but went back to Sri Lanka to work there. And one of her major achievements was the study of blue whales around Sri Lanka. And she found that, contrary to popular opinion, blue whales do not undertake long migrations. And those around Sri Lanka actually stayed in Sri Lankan waters throughout their lives. And then more recently, Cristina Romero, a specialist in ocean chemistry and plastic pollution. And she's been one of the main leaders in the world, highlighting the impact of plastic pollution on marine and terrestrial life. Well, let's look at some Namibian women pioneers. The first one I'll mention is Josephine Edward, who's a fisheries biologist at Netwerk in Swakopmund. And she's the only ichthyoplankton, in other words, animal plankton researcher in Namibia. And she focuses on a very important area, and that is mapping fish spawning and nursery grounds. And she founded a consultancy called Lady Marine Consultancy, which promotes women in marine science. Another Namibian marine scientist, this time a marine geologist, is Tamara Herhal. She has expertise in submerged diamond-bearing gravel shorelines, very important for the Namibian economy, and specializes in high-resolution surveys. Veronica Kalinasha, she's a specialist in mariculture and also in fisheries management. So you can see they've divided their expertise up into the many different fields that serve the Namibian economy. Priscilla Ngagulwa, she specializes in seabird conservation, but also in marine mammals such as dolphins. And she, like many other women marine scientists, faced a lot of difficulty early in her career. In her case, she came from a village far inland, and she had a fear of water. But she transitioned from that fear and now spends very long hours out at sea. Nadine Kolstad, she's renowned for her ocean protection initiatives, and particularly the protection of Namibian islands and the bird and mammal populations on those islands. Ida Winona Hendricks, she researches bioacoustics, in other words, the sounds made by animals underwater and how we can learn about their biology, their population density, and their migrations from their sounds. And like many other marine scientists, she's a vocal advocate for women in ocean science. And then we mustn't forget that the people who advance marine science are not only scientists, but also the captains of the ships that go to sea. And we'd like to acknowledge Captain Nalago Kwedi, who's the first woman in Namibia to qualify as a fishing ship captain with Nova Nail. And she featured in the award-winning documentary, The City Born from the Sea. Right, I'd like to tell you about a few women marine scientists from South Africa, whom I've had the privilege of working with. Dr. Kerry Sink. who works for the South African National Biodiversity Institute in Cape Town. She established the SASSI system, whereby you can determine whether a fish is sustainably harvested or not when you decide whether or not to eat it in a restaurant. She's also been very active in the proclamation of MPAs, which are marine protected areas. And through her interventions, 29 marine protected areas have been declared around the South African coast. And she also is deeply involved in marine conservation policy. Judy Manlane is probably South Africa's leading marine science communicator. She started at Ushaka Marine World in Durban. She's now associated with the Two Oceans Aquarium in Cape Town. And she initiated MPA Day, which is now celebrated worldwide. And then two women marine scientists who I've had a lifetime involvement with are the final two I'll mention. Margaret Smith on the left with her famous husband, J.L.B. Smith. Margaret had originally planned to be a medical doctor, but she married J.L.B. Smith, one of the world's most famous ichthyologists, and initially acted as his assistant and artist, but eventually became a marine scientist in her own right. And together they published this fantastic series of books on the fishes of Southern Africa. These are the various editions, and the latest edition, published 3 years ago, goes to 5 books. This is the institute that she established in Grahamstown, Makonda, in South Africa in 1977. And it is the largest fish research institute in Africa, and it's associated with the Department of Ichthyology and Fisheries Science at Rhodes University. And then the second woman marine scientist I'd like to mention is Marjorie Courtney Latimer. And I've had the good fortune to have known her ever since I was a child in East London in South Africa, where I grew up, and where she was the first director of the East London Museum. And what amazes me is how many parallels there are between Marjorie Courtney Latimer and Dr. T here in Lüderitz. She also is deeply passionate about what she did. She also used family collections of cultural and natural artifacts and specimens to establish her museum, and throughout her life had a major impact in the field of museology. She came from a very poor family, in fact so poor that she was unable to complete her schooling. And when she applied, well, she didn't actually apply for the directorship of East London, she was asked to apply. She was competing with people with PhDs and years of experience. But because of her incredible knowledge of natural history and her passion, she was appointed. And she was the first director of that museum for 31 years. And one of her immediate decisions was she wasn't going to follow the Victorian trend of just having sort of eclectic collections of everything clustered together. She was going to make her museum relevant to the local community. And as I said, the collections that her family had made formed the seed for the museum's collections. She was one of the first museum scientists in South Africa to create life-size dioramas. And here you can see a isiXhosa cultural diorama showing the red blanket people from the Eastern Cape. And she also established wonderful natural dioramas, similar to the ones that you'll find in the Namibia Maritime Museum. And her museum was the first to have a comprehensive display on the marine fishes of Southern Africa. This is back in the 1930s. She was completely untrained as a taxidermist, yet when this giant manta ray was delivered to the museum by a fisherman, she set about mounting it, this also in the 1930s, and to this day it's still on display in the museum. But Marjorie's greatest claim to fame is she was the scientist who recognized when the first coelacanth was caught off East London that this is something special. She kept it for science, and she sent that little drawing, top left there, to Professor J.L.B. Smith, the ichthyologist in Grahamstown, pointing out to him this discovery. And there's the first mount of that fish. Marjorie also had many other claims to fame. She was a very competent botanist, And this is a new species of plant that was named after her. And she also had 2 subspecies of birds named after her, but she had a good knowledge of ornithology. And at the end of her career, her official title was Freeman Dame Dr. Marjorie Courtney Latimer, with the whole alphabet soup behind her name. A remarkable achievement for someone who wasn't able to finish her schooling.
You can go and check out Oceanicas, Pioneers of Oceanography, a traveling exhibition that showcases the groundbreaking contributions of 20 remarkable women in ocean science, many of whom have been overlooked in history. Now, this exhibition is on show in the Saloma Julius foyer at the Luderitz Old Power Station, and it is definitely a must-see and a worthwhile trip. Daarmee kom ons dan aan die einde van die episode. Ek nooi graag alle breins en besighede om gebruik te maak van Aitsa indien julle enigiets wil adverteer. Aitsa is the place for you to go to. Contact Herklas Laboskagni on 0816888360 for your advertising needs. Finally, if you have a tale to tell, connect with Aitsa via Facebook or WhatsApp at 081-299-1211 in Namibia or 0828325674 if you are in South Africa. Maak gerus ook 'n draai by ons webwerf aitsafrica.com vir lekker lees plaaslik vervaardigde konten. Volgende maandag maak ons weer so. Totsiens.